While it is now quite common for writers in the fantasy genre, or any genre, to include protagonists and other characters from the LGBTQ community in their stories, this is a recent phenomenon. There are exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, those who now follow this trend fall into two categories. The first is those authors who seamlessly include them in their stories, and they never seem out of place. The best of these are like Richard Morgan in his marvellous trilogy A Land Fit for Heroes. Many other writers just slot them in because it is considered the right thing to do. It is usually quite clear which category a writer falls into. All of these writers owe a debt to those few who, decades beforehand, paved the way. Great authors who insisted on including same-sex relationships in their writing at a time when it was frowned upon to do so and could ruin a career. Perhaps the best of these was Mary Renault, whose trilogy about Alexander the Great was published between 1969 and 1981. While Ursula K. Le Guin was doing her part by insisting her heroes and heroines were non-white, Mary Renault made it clear many of her characters were gay. Her most famous gay icon is Alexander the Great. She introduces him in the first of a trilogy, Fire from Heaven, which tells of his childhood and youth, an origin story, so to speak. We learn of his tuition under Aristotle and his same-sex relationship with his friend Hephaestion. The trilogy continues with the Persian boy, narrated by Bagoas, who is castrated and sold as a slave to the king of Persia and ends up becoming Alexander's lover. The series finishes with Funeral Games, which deals with the aftermath following Alexander's death. The books in this trilogy were some of the first mainstream works to feature homosexual relationships that became bestsellers. There are those who say that she could only get away with this by turning away from modern times and writing stories about male lovers in the warrior societies of ancient Greece. She no longer had to deal with the anti-gay prejudice so prominent during her lifetime. Those who say this do her a disservice. Long before she turned to ancient Greece, she was writing books about same-sex relationships. Colena, an openly lesbian character, features in Purposes of Love, published in 1939. Her novel, The Friendly Young Ladies, about a lesbian relationship between a writer and a nurse, was published 4 years later. The Charioteer of 1953 is considered an early example of the gay novel, in which the two main characters, Ralph and Laurie, look to Greek ideals as a template for how to understand their own homosexuality. Renault herself was openly gay. From 1948, she lived in South Africa with her partner. South Africa was far more tolerant than Britain, the land of her birth, when it came to same-sex relationships. She never returned to Britain and continued to write until her death in 1983. But back to the Alexander trilogy, which I believe every lover of fantasy should read. There is only a hint of magic in it, but while it is mainly an historical fiction, that magic is there. And Mary Renault wrote at a time when it was common to spend a few years honing a novel until it was near perfection. Authors today, in the fantasy genre especially, are often expected to churn out at least one book a year. When Emily Wilson reviewed the first in the trilogy, Fire from Heaven, for The Guardian, she wrote, "This is not just a novel, it's also the best imagining we are ever likely to have of a man who tore up history." I can only agree. Beautifully written and thoroughly recommended. Well, that's all for this episode. If you like these podcasts and find them useful, please follow or subscribe and share them with your friends. If you want to help with the cost of making them, you can buy me a cup of coffee.